Okay, now, if I went farther, right, if I went farther to the left, what would we expect to see on this graph? It would just keep going, right? Dot, 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 dot. Right, and if I kept going over here, it would keep going. This graph goes forever to the left and to the right. It just keeps repeating itself. Right, a sine function, like all the trig functions, what's known as a periodic function because it repeats itself. Right, in this case, it's starting at 0. Right, it goes from 0 to its maximum of 1 to 0 to its minimum of -1, and then back to 0, and then it starts over again. This is one wave or one period of it. Okay. What is the minimum value on that graph? The minimum y value. -1. What is the maximum value? It's 1. You know, and because we know where those values came from, right? They're the y coordinates on the unit circle. They could never be more than 1 or less than -1. That's why. Now, we want to do, understanding what the sine function is, now we want to be able to say these kinds of things. The properties, right? What is the domain when this goes on forever to the left and forever to the right? We would say that the domain is all real numbers, okay? All reals, which means there's not anything that you can't plug in to a sine function. There's nothing you'd plug in and have it come back undefined, right? Anything you want, you can plug in. The range, though, is not all real numbers. What is the range? How could we say what we see on the graph here? Right? Okay, this is, you write this as a 3-part inequality, right? It has to be -1 less than or equal to y less than or equal to 1. That's saying that y is in between -1 on the left and 1 on the right, or -1 below and 1 on top. Okay, what about the y-intercept? Do you see any? Does it cross the y-axis anywhere? Where? At 0, right there, right? It's crossing at 0. Okay. Does it cross the x-axis anywhere? Many times, right? You can see on this graph, it's crossing at -pi, 0, pi, 2 pi. Where do you think it'll cross again? 3 pi, and then 4 pi. Every multiple of pi, it will have another x-intercept. The way you say that is n pi, meaning all multiples, n is an integer, so all multiples of pi, x-intercept. Even negative numbers for n, right? We got -1/10 pi over here, right? Now there's two things that we haven't really spoken about that are just specific to this trig function. Well, one of them we kind of did, and that is the period. The period of a function is how long does it take in the x interval to go through one wavelength, right? So if it starts at 0 and goes through one entire wavelength by 2 pi, then the period is 2 pi. Right? So this is one period. So the period equals 2 pi. So that's something you talk about with trig functions. What is the period? The second thing that you would talk about is the amplitude of the graph. The amplitude means how high does it go above the middle and below the middle. It's going to do the same thing, right? It goes the same distance above as it does below. That would be this distance here. Right? That is the amplitude. And what does it look like the amplitude is? How far is it in the y direction from here to here? It's 1, right? So the amplitude is 1.